Hello, and welcome to Folger Encores. I'm Owen Williams, Associate Director for Scholarly Programs at the Folger Institute. In this Encore series, the Folger has been sharing selections from plays, music, and readings with you. This week, we're revisiting the Shakespeare's birthday lecture, Shakespeare's Virtues, delivered by Professor Julia Reinhardt Lupton in 2018. Courage, trust, hope, and patience are some of the many virtues cultivated by the characters in Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. In this talk, Professor Lupton uses this famous comedy as a blueprint to demonstrate the surprising potential for the creation of more virtuous humans, in his time as well as in ours. She is joined by actor Eric Hissam, whose Bernard Nightingale won the Helen Hayes Best Supporting Actor Award in the Folger Theater's production of Tom Stoppard's Arcadia. We were honored when Julie accepted our invitation to join the long line of renowned Shakespeareans in delivering this talk, an annual lecture celebrating Shakespeare's traditional birthday that stretches back to the Folger's founding in 1932. Her scholarship and public humanities work combines a vast knowledge of religious thought, Aristotelian philosophy, and Shakespeare's plays and performance, all shot through with a profoundly playful sense of what resonates with the public that Julia sees as her core audience. She invariably strives to apply practical lessons from Shakespeare to the everyday challenges and situations we face, all with an eye on the original definition of virtue, that is, actualizing the qualities that have the potential to make us truly happy within all the overlapping communities we inhabit. There are few scholars active today who combine her professional accomplishments with her deep commitment to what the humanities offer that make us better. Better readers, better thinkers, better citizens of a democracy, and better humans. Her work exemplifies what thinking with Shakespeare means. We hope you will continue joining us for these weekly episodes of Encores, highlighting all that the Folger has to offer. If you would like to know more about the Folger and the Folger Institute, please visit folger.edu. Thank you.
Now I'm going to turn to the job placement. We have a job placement problem in the humanities, and I'm going to solve it tonight by reading Act 1, Scene 2 of Twelfth Night as an allegory of job placement. Seriously, I am. If anyone can do it, it's me. So as you may recall, Viola has been shipwrecked on the shores of Illyria. She is rescued by the captain. She doesn't know if her twin brother Sebastian is dead or alive, and my twin sister Ellen is here in the audience. So twins are big in our family. Yet by the end of the scene, she has a plan. She's going to go work as a boy page for Count Orsino. How does she get from despair and confusion to employment? My graduate students want to know. So, to understand this, I read the scene with several groups of social workers, professional capacity builders, who I thought might give me some insight into the relationship between Viola and the captain and her ability to build resilience in Twelfth Night for herself and for others. So what did my reading partners help me see? What they helped me see is that Viola is a displaced person who needs to find a placement. So placement, along with virtue, has become a kind of key word for me in Twelfth Night. She is like any young person set adrift by family loss, abuse, or disaster, about to go into, say, foster care after being separated from her brother. We could also think of her as a refugee or an unaccompanied minor, a migrant to these unknown and potentially hostile shores where her legal status is uncertain. Or we could think of her as a homeless transgender teen. Think of how that opening scene of Shipwreck takes the hermaphroditic symbol of the fraternal twins and catastrophically divides them. And Viola is a broken person who has to figure out how to reincorporate the Sebastian into the Viola. Or, if those are all hard sells, I submit this. What if she is an apprentice, a young person seeking service in a noble household, or perhaps in a theater, as Shakespeare might have done when he was seeking perhaps service in an unknown royal or noble household during his so-called lost years. Orphan, refugee, gender outlaw, or apprentice. The point is not to vote and say one of these predicaments is more appropriate or fitting than another, but rather to begin to read the play for rhythms of distress and repair, of placement and displacement across a range of situations and historical periods, to allow the play, in Viola's terms, to reverberate across situations in a kind of scansion of virtue. The scene begins with her famous question, "What country, friends, is this?" In drama, but also in life, physical space is always also moral space. We want to know where we are geographically, but we also want ethical direction. We want to know what to do. So what country, friends, is this means what norms and customs apply here? Do they relate to my own history and values? Is this a place of friends and friendship in that broader Aristotelian sense of philia? That is, will I be able to cultivate the attachments I need to survive and flourish? So if she is a young person in need of a placement, who is the captain? Well, I'd like to suggest that the captain is her caseworker. He belongs to both ship and shore. He says, I was bred and born not 3 hours travel from this very place. She pays him a bit of money. He is not a guardian angel or a good Samaritan, but a capable working man. Together, they consider the fate of Sebastian. She thinks he has died at sea, but then allows herself to hope. Perchance he is not drowned. What think you, sailors? And the captain says, it was perchance that you were saved, right? The happenstance in happiness, the demon in eudaimonia. So now we're going to listen for the virtue language in the captain's description of Sebastian, the twin, Sebastian's efforts to survive the sea. Eric?
True, madam, and to comfort you with chance, assure yourself, after our ship did split, when you and those poor number saved with you hung on our driving boat, I saw your brother, most provident in peril, bind himself, courage and hope both, teaching him the practice to a strong mast that lived upon the sea, where, like Arion on the dolphin's back, I saw him hold acquaintance with the waves, so long as I could see.
Thank you, Eric. So the captain is sketching another virtue ecology, and he is also describing virtue as capacity building. Sebastian is provident in peril. Providere means to look forward, to look around, to be able to scan the environment for potential help where someone else might see only death and destruction. Two virtues educate him, teach him the practice to scan the environment in this manner, and they are courage and hope. And they teach him to bind the floating mast, where someone else might see as sea trash, into a life preserver that will help him to get to shore. Notice that he does not fight the waves, taking arms against a sea of troubles, as Hamlet does, but rather holds acquaintance with the waves, right? He treats them as friends in a conversation, perhaps as friends in an improvisational banter of the sorts that we see later in the play, for example, between Viola and Feste. He is able to take the rhythms of the sea and coordinate his own breathing and expectations with the sea in order to survive. Now, what helped me in articulating that reading was my conversation with social worker Aidan Michael. When we read this passage together, she zeroed in on it, and she said that she commonly uses surfing metaphors when she is talking to clients in distress. The water, she tells her clients, can either drown you or push you to shore. So Sebastian, or I should say Shakespeare, is using a very ancient metaphor. We can find this all the way back in Homer's Odyssey, which continues to be current today as a way of talking about resilience and survival through capacity building. Adoption specialist Sharon Rocha saw something else in this passage. What she called my attention to was the emphasis on the desire for the missing sibling. She said that for adopted children who are seeking knowledge about their birth families, their first impulse is to find that lost brother or sister, because there is somewhat less resentment and fear around the sibling than there is around the parent. And those siblings thus are more available as conduits of what Sebastian calls hope and courage. Well, Viola is heartened, and what follows is a discussion of possible placements. Should Viola serve Olivia or Orsino? Learning that Olivia has also lost a brother, she is very attracted to the idea of seeking her patronage. She says, "Oh, that I served that lady and might not be delivered to the world till I had made my own occasion mellow what my estate is." So she's imagining here Olivia's veils becoming something like that bushel basket under which she can hide her virtues until she finds out whether her brother is alive or dead. It's the first articulation in the play of a virtue that Viola will later call patience. And patience is a kind of active latency. It's dunamis as comportment. It's a time of healing, of repair, and of expectancy. The captain informs her, however, that Olivia is not accepting placements right now. So, okay, she decides to serve Orsino instead. And she does what my social worker friends call a skills inventory. For I can sing and speak to him in many sorts of music. That will allow me very worth his service. So an important part of capacity building is finding out what your capacities are and what your resources might be in developing those and making them into active strengths. Before she takes up this placement, however, she has to decide to trust the captain. And these are kind of strange words, which I think are often cut from performance because they don't seem to advance the story that much. And there's something a little dark about them. She says, "There is a fair behavior in thee, captain, and though that nature with a beauteous wall doth oft close in pollution, yet of thee I will believe thou hast a mind that suits with this thy fair and outward character." So I think we learn something important about Viola in these words. We learn that she is young but not naive. She is somewhere between the tiny little boy and the disillusioned adult in Feste's final song of innocence and experience. The reference to pollution is troubling, but I think also revelatory. I think it points to some prior history of betrayal and abuse, perhaps the original sin that got these twins onto the boat to nowhere in the first place. So too, that word eunuch that we saw just a few seconds ago, it gives a sexual wash to Viola's blank history, and again, pointing to fraternal twins as this ancient symbol of hermaphroditic union and the violent birth of the shipwreck as creating a cleavage and difficulty in Viola's identity that needs to be reworked and healed in the play. I think the lines also impute some depth to the captain as well. Aidan Michael, herself a refugee from Eritrea, told me that the best social workers may be those that had themselves undergone momentous life changes. What Aidan taught me to infer is that this is not the captain's first shipwreck, nor is it Shakespeare's. So what I'm suggesting here is that the captain is a kind of caseworker with his own waterlogged baggage, that Viola is a talented and charismatic, but also damaged young person, and that their dialogue is a kind of intake interview. Who are you? What brought you here? And why are you so alone? Who in this virtue-poor community can best employ, shelter, or foster you? What are your skills and talents? And what are your needs and disabilities? And finally, why should you trust me? This is an exercise in placement in the human resources and social services sense: job placement, placement in foster care, placement in a shelter or program. Placement requires orientation. It requires an inventory of skills. It requires partnership with a worldly guide. And it ends, when it ends successfully, in the decision to take up residence or employment somewhere. In dramaturgy, placement involves blocking, right? It's that very inventive and basic working out of the spaces, the moral spaces and the physical spaces of a play, as a director works with actors to find their ways into a role and into a story. In this early scene, we're really listening to Viola and Captain, but also to Shakespeare blocking the play, roughing out its spaces of action, its great households, its scenes of shelter and service. Placement implies displacement, but it emphasizes the creative efforts of mending and patching that animate virtue as capacity building.